All right, cool. We are live. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me. Today, we're going to be going over Catholic subreddit or Catholicism subreddit, going over the sacred music video that I put out because they left a lot of comments there. I'll also be going over the sacred music comment section on YouTube, and we're going to go over the contrast between the two, as well as how to appropriately answer, basically moving forward from here, right? Because that video was very much about promoting the faith, promoting what we have been passed down in the faith, what is allowed within the Novus Ordo, and how to bring out the richness of our tradition with what we currently have. And so there's a lot of despair, or at least comments of despair, and we'll go through that. And like I said, how to properly address these in the future. So all right, cool. That is cool. And there's there's also something, there's a poll in there's a poll on the YouTube channel. And so if you could take that poll, it's on the change in policy for the GOP on the pro-life issue and what they recently have come out and said, including those that ran as Catholics for various positions. So obviously it's important, given that this is a presidential year and what we're currently dealing with as a whole within the United States. So all right, so let's get into it. No, too small. There we go. All right, so if you haven't seen this video, it is the video on, like I said, sacred music that I did with Dominic, my music director. And so what we did was we went over a lot of things, and I added all of this, which just goes over what's available. So simple English propers, chants of the Roman Missal, congregation booklet for order of sung mass in English. Share this with your priest. Musicam Sacrum, Sacrosanctum Concilium, and then Trale. Oh my gosh, I'm gonna butcher this one. Solicitudini. So I think. All right. So make sure you vote. So I'm gonna go by that because I do want to talk about this issue prominently. Hello, Olive. Nice to meet you. So all right. So what we're going to go over is some of the. All right. So it should be big enough. I'm going to read some of these comments because, one, I want to bring out the good comments, but I also want to bring out the bad comments because there's ways to address them. And given that my parish went through a lot of fluctuations to get where we are, I think it's my responsibility to address those because a lot of people are using those as quite literally excuses for not doing anything or just complaining online. And so we're going to go over that because it matters, right? Like the church isn't going to move forward if we're just going to complain online and not do anything. So this one is, let's see, I'm going to just pop it up one more. Okay. You'd be surprised by asking nicely how open someone might be. I bumped into a younger priest in the parking lot, asked if we could sing Agnus Dei, and he said yes. I know not huge win, but it certainly starts to move us back into resurrecting our lost traditions. At the daily mass, half of us failed. So that is a very simple thing. It's a very simple thing, and Veronica, at Veronica, is playing it down a little bit, but it's actually a huge thing because a lot of priests do not do that. So they won't take a suggestion and then apply it in the mass in such a simple way. Usually there's some sort of like push, like where there's several people doing it, but with this, like we're seeing a very clear, like younger priest that's willing to do the Agnus Dei in what I would assume to be in Latin, because she but that's, yeah. So let's see. Okay, so for those that are looking for suggestions on where to go for a chanting channel on YouTube, there was a recommendation for John Shaw. So look up John Shaw for chanting. It's talking about eulogies, so we'll just skip that. They're forbidden. We're not supposed to have them. They'll never know folks want it if nobody says anything. Exactly. So like if you're scared boomers are going to want their preference, well, if that's the only preference the priest hears, don't be surprised that that's the preference that he goes with. Sacred music is in need of a deep development according to our sacred council. I wish priests cared as much as you two do. It sounds like a long time for development for a parish to really get where it should be, but can be considering what your parish priest has gone through to achieve chant. Yes, so that took about 5 years. So we're not saying this is going to be like the next week, but that is going to depend on the congregation, right? Like it's going to depend on the makeup. It's going to depend on who's there. And so for our parish, which predominantly had an older generations there, it took about 5 years to happen. Now, did we lose some? Yes, we absolutely did. Our first music director actually left real fast, but that's okay. Like that has to happen because if you don't risk losing people, you're going to just stay where you're at quite literally until the boomers die, because like that's unfortunately how it goes. And then what's going to happen? Well, you've now just indoctrinated, and I use that term neutrally, not in a negative way, but you just indoctrinated the next generation to be completely okay with 70s music and not having the breadth of tradition that we should have. So that was a little bit of a lengthy answer, but have you done any videos about how to get into and influence parish governance? So I haven't done a video on that. I've definitely been part of parish governance in the past with others. If you guys want me to do it, please put it in the comment section. Frankly, because I'll forget about it. Like really, I'll forget about it if it's not there. So if you put it in the comment section, say we would like to how to influence parish government. That'll be something I can do because I do have experience with that across several parishes. So priests are all right. So priests are a direct reflection of their congregation. I've been traveling the Midwest and South and have been celebrating divine liturgy in many churches and noticed that amongst other things. I just want to point out Olive, which is in the chat right now, used amongst, and that is the correct word. Okay, so that is the correct word to use, not among. Amongst is the correct word. Yeah, so so it sounds like you go to a lot of Eastern Rite if you're going to divine liturgy, which is we've got a whole bunch in the Midwest, and so that's cool. But yeah, that's generally the thing is that the congregation is a reflection to the priest, and the priest is a reflection to the congregation. There's a cyclical pattern of influence there, and so like that's really important. And so Roman music sounds like the Beatles. Yeah. So that's okay. Yeah. So not to pick on Olive again, Olive Mule. It would take forever. All of them in the entire Midwest, honestly, starting the paperwork for the Melkite. Oh yeah, Melkite. Okay. Those celebratory hymns are breathtaking and fun to sing. So yeah, because like if we're not going to do anything, like if like those of us that are in the Latin Rite, if we're not going to do anything and try to move forward, even if it's something where you're moving to another parish, because like what's being taught and sung in the Mass is not appropriate, then do that. Like that is an option. Like my wife and I took 9 months to find a parish that would do something besides what my mom's generation did. And the reason why is because my mom's generation of worship like caused my generation to abandon the faith. Like the influence was overwhelming because there's just no passing on the tradition besides go to catechism and then you're done. So I wanted to make sure that we went to a parish that had someone with the intention of making sure that tradition was important. Like I said, when we first went to the parish that we're currently at, it was a typical Novus Ordo parish. And I have a video where I show before and after of how it was, and then how it was when we got there and how it is today. So let's see. Oh, my Mark. Regarding the Beatles, the only way to listen to them is with earmuffs, as James Bond says in Goldfinger. I went to Catholic school. Yeah, so there's actually a whole video. If you haven't seen it, there's a whole video I do about like the influence of Catholic schools on retention. So I get pretty critical about a lot of things. Yeah, and yeah, just because I'm only doing this because we just had one of your comments on. We have your comment on. Yeah, it's not. I'm not saying that you should necessarily stick it out. Whatever God's calling you to do in terms of what you're, how you're going to worship, like follow it. Whatever you think will bring you closer to God, follow it. So let's see. All right, so cool. All right, now we're going to go to Reddit. So I posted this 5 days ago. So I said the new mass has access to almost all the sacred music the TLM does. And I got a lot of interaction, which I don't typically get with videos. I usually get this kind of interaction with an actual Reddit post. So I'm actually happy to see that this happens. But there's some comments in here I want to point out because they go, again, towards despair. And it's really influential to when other people read it, because if you keep hearing all the time, oh, this is never going to happen, this sucks, the boomers are always going to do this. Like I said, nothing is going to go anywhere, and you're not going to actualize anything that you want or that you think should happen or what you think God is calling us to do. Because again, Vatican II, inspired by the Holy Spirit, is calling us to do certain things, right? To retain Latin in the Latin Rite, and to have Pride and Place Gregorian chant. So that's from Vatican II, Sacrosanctum Concilium. So it makes little sense that we would then be like, oh, well, we're just going to throw our hands up. So, and you'll see what I mean when we go through these. So the first one is, it's the first one. Of the dozens, if not hundreds of parishes I've been in my life, I have seen exactly one parish do this, and is one of the most trad parishes and one of the more trad dioceses in the United States. The buy-in mostly came from people want it to be as much in continuity with the TLM as possible without necessarily having the TLM for every mass. I would like to emphasize how exceptional this is and how essentially impossible it would be to replicate at 99% of other parishes. I don't want to be a doomer or say it isn't worth trying. It kind of sounds like it, right? Like just that we're about 10 feet up a 10,000 foot cliff in that regard in the NO. There's a reason people who want beautiful liturgy, music, etc. gravitate to the TLM. They don't have to fight tooth and nail with Susie Boomer or try to motivate Father Go. I love these names, by the way. Father Go Along, Get Along to take action just for a single inch of the Roman Catholic liturgy tradition to be included. Well, so there's a combination of things with this one. Okay, so besides the fact it does sound doom and gloom, like emphasizing how far you are when, like, of course that's going to, like, you're at the start line, the finish line's way over there. Like, I don't mean to be doom and gloom, but like, all right, so like that's 99% is pretty. That's I don't know how serious he is in saying that, because like I've been to several parishes that do practice Gregorian chant and are not TLM. Now, I want to get this out of the way because you will see people try and say this. The TLM, okay, I'm sorry, the Novus Ordo having Latin and Gregorian chant in the Mass is not it trying to be the TLM. That is not what's happening. That is the Novus Ordo actualizing what Vatican II has stated. The whole point of that, those like I don't want to say the whole point, but the Latin and Gregorian chant being in the Mass is a natural component of the Novus Ordo. It is not some added preference. It is something that is supposed to be there, as Vatican II states. So the idea that people, and like, I'm really sick of people saying this, it is not trying to be like the TLM. The only reason why people have that perception is that they assume that the TLM, like those that go to the Novus Ordo, want to basically LARP the TLM. That is not what's necessarily happening for everybody. Now, does that happen? I'm sure it does. But the idea that the Novus Ordo, trying to make a Novus Ordo like a TLM with Latin and Gregorian chant, that's not happening. That's just simply how it is. That is a natural component of the form. So, like, it's like saying like a Shih Tzu's trying to be like a golden retriever in being a dog. It's like, no, the dog is smaller. It's not as maybe profound, but it's still very much a dog. And so it's just a smaller dog. So yeah. So it's, if you're in the Latin Rite, you should have Latin in your Mass somewhere. And Gregorian chant, as stated in Vatican II, should have pride in place. So it doesn't matter if it's TLM or the Novus Ordo. So either one. So, all right. So let's point out to the next point that he says is Susie Boomer, which again is a hilarious name. The idea that you have to deal with Susie Boomer and Father Go Along to get along. How you deal with this? So Susie Boomer, like you actually have to deal with this the same way. You need to get groups of people that agree with you on Gregorian chant, and you need to simply present it to the priest. Now, you will have Susie Boomer complain about the like, again, Susie Boomer is just, it can be male or female in the in reality, right? Like, it could be Bob Boomer. We'll just name him that. But I'm just using that as a placeholder. But you have Susie Boomer complaining about chant. Well, if you have like 6 people, 6 families saying, hey, we want chant, and you have one Susie Boomer, guess who has more sway? Especially when you have kids. Like, there's like with those families, you have kids, and Susie Boomer doesn't. And I know this seems like you're strong arming, but you kind of have to. Like, and I know that sounds terrible, but it's like, it's not that you're strong arming so much, but that you're showing the fact that there's more interest in retaining tradition and having tradition be shown than whatever happened in the 70s. And my gosh, I have no idea. I just do not understand this. Oh, well, the kids really want this music. No, they freaking don't. Like, no, they don't. Like, that doesn't make sense, because the people who want tradition are the younger folks. So the idea that the kids just want the new contemporary stuff, like, that is a 70s mindset that people have not grown out of. So it's kind of like, I guess with a political comparison, like, you'll hear Russia as like the super bad person, like, even though that's like the Cold War is over and Russia hasn't really done, I mean, like, obviously there's the whole war in Ukraine, but prior to that, it was just basically, ooh, the boogeyman that is Russia. And that primarily comes from a mindset that doesn't adapt and understand the environment it's currently in. And so, like, that's very similar within the parishes, where boomers and those that are older will say, well, you know, the younger kids want the My Little Pony themed style hymns. And it's like, no, they don't. Like, demonstrably, that is not the case. So you need to actually show yourself and say, no, that's not what we want. So let's see. Let's see. You can still get old, even if you can't get old. Right. Right. So like you can still get old school hymns even if you can't get all the way to chant. Most congregations can handle those. So it's like, because you do want to ease parishes into that, right? Like you don't want to shock them. So there is a period of patience that should happen. Not everything is going to flip like that. Like you do have to give some time for the parish to acclimate to such a transition, because again, they've been dealing with 70s hymns, and that's not like, they've been conditioned for that, right? So like it'll be a shock to them. So you do have to have some sympathy for them and act on it, because that is their disposition right now. And so now we would argue it's wrong, because it's basically keeping the tradition within a decade and then just living that decade out for several years, as opposed to taking in the rich tradition that we have. But again, they're conditioned for this, and it's about making sure that they're understanding why this is happening, and not just shocking them, because we don't want them to leave the faith by doing this. We want them to embrace the traditional richness that we have. So the music comparison of Mass of the Ages episode 2 is an eye opener. Yeah, and that's where I got the My Little Pony comparison, because oh my gosh, it blew me away. It just it blew me away. I saw your comment, Olive. Like, I'm not gonna post it, but like I saw it. And no problem. No problem. All right, so the next one is, this is correct. My own parish is charismatic. They do Protestant chants in Mass. I have 2 sons and a health delicate wife. I do not have the strength nor the time to fight with literally 300 boomers about liturgy reverence. It is far more effective to go to the TLM near me. And again, one of the reasons why I push this and I promote this is because the TLM isn't going to be done or close to people, to most people. Okay. Most people within their vicinity that they can reasonably get to is a Novus Ordo. And so that's what I'm pushing, is because, like, statistically speaking, it makes no sense to push the TLM when the TLM cannot be promoted. Like, it's restricted right now, right? Like, it makes no sense that we would promote it when it's restricted, but make the because we're not able to develop new parishes within the diocese that are TLM only, or even just TLM. You have to get permission to get the TLM, right? And so it makes sense to instead target the Novus Ordo to be more reverent, more traditional. And then when hopefully the restriction is released, you can introduce the TLM and the people will be primed for it, right? Like, because you've made the NO reverent. You've made it to the point where you can make a transition, and it's not going to be so shocking or shocking at all, depending on how the priest handles it. Because a lot of this is going to come down to the priest. So, all right, let's go to the next one. Let's see. But most who want tradition leave because they think boomers run everything. In a way, yes, they do. But I'd argue it's due to inertia. Seems like few young people wanted to get involved. And while I'm sure some got labeled as trads, how many just assumed that boomers ran everything and never even really tried or fought for it? I get the feeling some just kind of gave a pouty face and went to a TLM parish rather than actually arguing for better stuff in our parish. Oh man. Again, this is my experience. Maybe it's different in other parts of the world. No, like the first comment we read, it was like this. I'm sorry, the second comment we read was literally exactly that. Just going to a TLM. Now, he gave his circumstances, right? Like, people have circumstances that they have to deal with, and I'm not saying he should have fought at the parish, because he said he had a sensitive wife. So I'm not blaming him for that, but I have heard this from several people who are able-bodied, who can fight at their parish to promote tradition, and they don't. They run to the TLM. And so it's great when you go to a TLM parish that is like localized and it's the only TLM parish. You go there and there's a bunch of kids and young families. But man, like if it's a diocesan parish, like, and you have the risk of what's happening or what's potentially happening, because that is still a rumor. It hasn't quite been validated about the restriction or the removal of diocesan TLMs. Well, then what are you going to do now? Because you have a whole bunch of people who are traveling like an hour to go to their parish, and the parish can no longer do what they wanted. And so now they're stuck with either continuing to go with that parish or to go to a Novus Ordo close by. There's a lot of arguments for and against going somewhere else, but I really do think if you are at a parish that hasn't started the inertia, as this guy says, I think you should try. And what I've been telling these people is this video and many on my channel are there to help get the momentum going, because yes, that's what we want to do. We want to get this momentum out there. There are several parishes. Mine's not the only one. Like, obviously it's not my parish. I only say it's mine because it's the congregation I'm a part of. My family of a congregation is what I'm a part of, and is promoting this. And it would be great to push it to other parishes, to get priests support and to make it so that we're able to not have to pick and choose so much like which parish we're going to go to, because one looks like the Protestant Pentecostal church down the road. Literally no difference besides the fact that they have like a valid consecration, but everything else aesthetically, the lyrics, the homilies are all the same. So in terms of like the bent or the angle, and so like we have to become more uniform. And when I did a comparison between the TLM and the Novus Ordo attitudes, and the Novus Ordo attitudes is horrendous because we're all over the place. We're clearly compromised as a community church within America, because a significant portion of us do not believe basic aspects of the faith, and we need to bring that back. And there's several ways to start that, but it's going to take a while, and you just have to deal with it. You have to pray. You have to push what you think the Holy Spirit is calling you to do. And you need to not be just complaining on the internet that it's too hard or things aren't moving fast enough or whatever. You got to trust God, and God also is in a way trusting you to cooperate with him. So, pray about that and see what God's calling you to do. All right. So here's one that really like floored me. I'm an Anglican who has been looking into Roman Catholicism. So we're looking at someone who's trying to convert. Okay. This is a very important detail. And I have to be honest, I am pretty disappointed in the music selection and a general lack of reverence the average parish around me seems to have. I know the replies I'm going to get are going to be like, but we have valid sacraments, etc. Regardless, it's sad to see such Protestant-looking services. This is extremely uncommon in Anglican and Episcopal churches in my area, and I had no idea contemporary worship was even a thing in the Catholic Church until I visited a few. I have watched YouTube videos of many churches in my diocese, and the overwhelming majority is contemporary. Also, I was surprised how much more we cross ourselves, bow, and kneel in the Anglican Church. So what they probably do, and just clarify, crossing themselves, that is a tradition that people do when God is named in a variety of ways, whether it's just God, the Trinity, each person. Like there's several points traditionally where you would cross yourself in the Mass. And so, and not to mention the bowing and kneeling. So like whenever Jesus's name is mentioned, we're supposed to bow. Whenever you enter into your pew, you're supposed to genuflect. Whenever you cross the altar, you're supposed to genuflect. So there's a lot of aspects here that, like, it is sad. It is sad because we have someone who's legitimately looking at the church, but the beauty isn't present. It's not shining through because the people that he's surrounded by are promoting a way of worship that is just it's within a particular time frame, right? Like the 70s, like making it look like the 70s. That's retaining a time of worship as opposed to a timeless worship in which we build upon, which is basically what Mass of the Ages argues when they show the tree for the Mass. So let's see. Pout pout Chad with a pout pout face. Oh, if you have that book and you have kids, you know exactly what that is. Yeah. So I remember. Okay, so yeah, well, this is good. Hey, side note here, reminder: Catholic Palooza is in 19 days in Virginia. So if you're watching this in Virginia, I think I'm going. Pray for my funds, a music gathering, PR Catholic lay people with mead made and blessed by monks. Enoch will be there. So if you don't know who Enoch is, make sure you look him up on YouTube. His videos are really good. Like he does a type of rapping, but the rapping sounds good and it's Catholic. So like it is, you know, you could argue it's contemporary, obviously, because it's it's more in the entertainment. I don't know of any place that, well, yeah, because I mean he's a rapper or whatever. Look up Enoch, okay? So like he's got really good music. So I don't usually say that for rap. I hate rap as a genre. So no, but his is really good. Uh all right, so all right. So getting back to this before I get derailed with the Enoch thing. So the whole idea is like we have people who are legitimately looking on the inside of the church and they're choosing to I don't want to say it's pushing him away, but clearly like you wouldn't make a post like this if it wasn't bothering you. And so the fact that it does bother someone is a problem, because it becomes a type of step, you know, it becomes a type of what do you call it, impediment potentially, and so we don't want that. All right. Right. So he goes on to say, I don't understand why it's lost on so many people that most of us, and especially the younger folks, do not want to go to a mass and have it just to be just another reflection of the modern secular world. If we walk through those doors and it's no different than the outside world, why would we go? Yes, the sacraments, but in order to truly appreciate the sacraments, we should show the utmost seriousness and reverence for the one present in them. Worship requires all the senses. I don't need Brian the accountant playing folk guitar for an hour. Oh my gosh, this guy, I mean, like, this guy, I hope he converts, but like, that is exactly it. Like, right? Like, that is exactly what it is. The sacraments are supposed to include all the senses. And we don't want something sounding, again, contemporary, secular. We want something that sounds timeless and, like you said, serious and reflective of where you are. Because, again, I've never understood this growing up. If we believe the source and the summit of the faith is the Eucharist, why are we okay with all the why are we okay with all the abuses that happen in Mass? That has never made sense to me. And that includes like poor music. And now, I don't know how many of you have been paying attention with this, but the idea that there's so many problems coming with the writers of the music that came out from the 70s and that is still being used as hymns is a like fundamental problem that I have. Now, like, it's like the same thing with the Rupnik art, given the scandal that is what what happened with him and religious sisters. Like, that is horrendous, and should probably be removed. But okay, so that's, I don't want to get derailed. Let's see. All right. So, all right. So this is where I was growing up. I grew up in a high church Anglican parish and was confused with the lack of organ, communion rail. What I will say is there's a fairly wide variety of options within the Catholic Church these days, and a lot of the contemporary stuff is sliding away in quite a few places. So this idea that like we're not able to bring back tradition, like the first one said, like 99%. Again, I'm seeing more and more, especially younger priests, coming out and saying, "Yeah, no, we're going to do this. We're going to embrace the richness of the tradition." So it is something that is happening on a pretty good scale. It's not something that's simply passing away, right? Like, it's not like, oh, well, we're going to continue doing the 70s, even though the boomers are gone. Okay. So it's something that's going to continue. And for anybody, because I've had a few comments say this, and I even heard a priest mention this. He didn't say my name or anything, and he wasn't referencing my channel, just the idea that I keep bringing up boomers, like other people that he was commenting against. The reason why I bring up boomers is because that's a general mentality. Okay, that is a general mentality of a generation, and what that generation has passed down to us. So Gen X, Gen Z, millennials, which I'm part of, we have inherited what they've passed on, and some of them are still alive. Okay, I do not say boomers as if you are not worthy of being recognized as someone with dignity and made in the image and likeness of God. That is not what I say when I say boomers. It is a reference to a generation. It is a reference to the age of the person. So I just want to make that clear, because I have had comments where people have gone off on me about that, and I really don't want to have that confused at all. So, because you shouldn't look down on them, like on people who are older, simply because they're older, or what they've known and passed on isn't great, right? Like, it doesn't mean that they are not worth what they are, which is a human person loved by God. Boomers. So, all right. So, all right. So, okay. So before I go on though, and this is, I guess, a good stopping spot, not to end the thing, but to promote something. So, recently a family friend lost her son. That's her son, and his family in a truck accident. The entire family has died, and I am trying to promote their fundraiser because they live in another state, and we want to make sure that funding is not a problem for giving them a proper burial. And so I am putting this in the chat right now. If you are able to, please send that, or please donate to them. I do know Candy Pencala, who organized this fundraiser. I know her personally. So we are trying to help the family, and I ask if you're able to please do so. And they would greatly appreciate it. So just wanted to bring that to your attention. And thank you for everyone for, again, any prayers that you give, because even if you don't donate, prayers are also appreciated. So all right, let's go back. So I'm a former Episcopalian who became Catholic over 2 years ago. I noticed the same thing about the lack of reverence at most parishes. I recommend using the Reverent Catholic Mass website to help find a parish in your area. I've never actually used this, but it the fact that it's being like, that's a weird thing to talk about, right? Like, hey, like, random person, we have this Reverent Catholic Mass website. And it tells you the difference between those that are reverent and those that aren't. And it's just like a weird thing. Like, it's a weird thing to talk about, because you're basically saying, well, the rest are not reverent. The implication is the rest are not reverent, or are not consistently reverent. And so that is a problem just as Catholics in general. We should not have that issue. I'm not saying he shouldn't be sharing this, but it is as like it shows a symptom of a problem that we have. And so we need to obviously address that. All right, so here's another one. So a JAT, I don't know if you guys have noticed this, but JAT Attack 33 has been in a lot of responses, and I've been avoiding them because they all kind of say the same thing. And so I'm kind of like, or like in a general direction, and I want to make sure that I'm not just giving him a bunch of time or responding directly to him. So this one is one that he says that kind of points to the problem. And yet it is almost never used. Parishioners will refuse to allow it to be used, and some will leave it if the priest brings in more traditional music. And that's fine. That is fine if people leave because the priest changes the music. That is not on the priest, that is on them, right? Like, so if they end up leaving, that is on them. You can't control people, and effectively, like, you can't do anything if that is always your worry. Oh, well, this may drive people away. Like, people said no to Jesus. Like, they said no to Jesus. Okay? Like, if Jesus is going to be told no, I'm sure we'll be told no several times when we're promoting the truth. So just that is always in the back of my mind, and I always find these to be like a really, it's not that they're practically not important, it's that it's justified to, like, I don't see the point of saying this without giving some sort of advice. So, because he goes on to say, it's all well and good to say that the new mass has access to almost all of the same sacred music the TLM does, but it de facto doesn't. There are likely more parishes in the world that use guitars at mass than NO parishes that use Gregorian chant or Roman polyphony for the majority of the mass. Like, what's the point of that comment besides just stating that you know all of this stuff? Like, the point is to promote, like, again, like, and I stated this in like my opening comment on the when I posted this. It's to promote this to the priests and music directors, to get them so they know what they're talking or know what's available to them, to get others to be convinced that the for him sandwich is not the only thing we need, or I'm sorry, the only thing that is available. Sorry. Yeah, so Jesus literally told us there would be division even among families. And so, and you know what? Like, what was the last reading? Jesus went into his place of where his family was, and he wasn't able to perform a lot of miracles there because of their lack of belief. And so it's like, again, it's like going to the point of like, this happened to Jesus. Like, we're not God. Like, so it's like, we should understand that we need to, it's going to take us a while to do this. All right, so here's one. My local NO got a new priest in about 5 or 6 months ago. Okay. He offers the NO mainly, but says the TLM in private for those interested. The parish was in bad shape. Priests who didn't care, bad music, etc., had taken its toll over the years. Anyways, he talked with the music director and told him they were going to start using chant and the organ again. The music director said no way and resigned that week. The priest thankfully had a friend that volunteered as a music director and brought back the sacred music that has been missing for so long. The priest in a later bulletin stated that he had received a number of complaints that the music is too sad and sounds like I'm at a funeral. This was during Lent, mind you, which that's kind of the point. But thankfully, he has stuck to his guns, and the parish is much better for it. That is a priest you need to support. If you notice a more traditional sounding hymn, or you notice Gregorian chant being introduced, you go right to the priest and you tell him as soon as possible, I love what you're doing. I support what you're doing. I appreciate the fact that you're trying to bring more reverence to the worship of God. You need to do that because he is going to get pushback. And, there are some priests who are very, they again, the father go along to get along. Like some of them have a weak spine and they do need help, and they do need help from the laity. And that's where we're supposed to come in. So all right. Right. And again, people will say, right, what does access matter if it never actually addressed, and probably never will be in many places? Again, this is like, I don't know where they're getting their assumptions that this won't happen, or that, like, again, things like this take time. And so we're not here to just twiddle our thumbs on Twitter or Reddit and say, oh, I guess like this is going to take a lot of effort on my part. I guess it's just not going to happen. Or it's going to require me to bring other people involved and be social in a very physical way outside of my computer. So I guess it's probably not going to happen. Like I said, like my parish with support from the to the priest, with support to the priest from the laity, because it wasn't just me, it was other people as well. He was able to, over 5 years, bring Gregorian chant as part of our regular worship at every mass. So, again, this is it's going to take a while. And I know some of these points I'm saying over and over again, but there are so many people that think that it's going to happen like that. Or if it doesn't happen like that, it's not going to happen at all. This is a part of our culture, right? In America, we need things to happen fast now. As soon as I say something, you should be doing it, or whatever. The expectation of reaction time, or how long it takes for something to happen, it's ridiculous what our expectations are. It's unreal what our expectations are, and we need to deal with that. Like, we need to basically humble ourselves and come back to reality on that. So, all right. There's just a few more. Okay, I'm not going to read that, but you can probably read it. So you can start small, although it's also helpful when those in positions of authority are pushing for it as well. In my diocese, the bishop has begun requesting that every parish sing parts of the Mass ordinary in Latin during certain times of year. It began with requesting everyone to sing Agnus Dei in Latin during Lent. I hope it continues and gradually becomes more encompassing. You get a plus. All right, let them leave. Like you said, there's more parishes out there. If they'll leave over music, getting more reverent. The change doesn't have to be complete and overnight either. They can start with one song in one mass, maybe gradually transitioning one mass to more traditional music before introducing more to the rest. Took our parish 7 years to get to the taste and see parish to chant and polyphony. So this is another example of something that happened in my parish happening at this woman's parish. And again, you have Jad Attack basically giving responses to these two. Again, not necessarily helpful. Like, yeah, it's like part of the problem will be you'll have like bishops that will push back on this. And sometimes it's the regional bishop if you live in an archdiocese, or and sometimes it's just the bishop. And you are limited to a certain extent of what you could do. But there was someone on my Twitter feed that was asking, she was a music director. I don't remember her name off the top of my head right now, but I had responded to her earlier. And I gave her the idea of, okay, well, you have a new priest. Your parish is fairly liberal, but more on the conservative side. It's the most conservative parish in the area. Still liberal because of the makeup. And, I said, what about introducing some sort of like teaching session on Gregorian chant, not during Mass, but like in the afternoon on a weekend or something. Or on a Tuesday or Wednesday or something like that, where you're introducing it to the parish, but it's a gradual thing. Like, you're not saying this is going to be there. It's saying, if you want to learn Gregorian chant, here it is. And then you'll see it's a way of testing the waters to see who's interested, who supports it, or who will say, like, in an email, I would love to go. I think we should have this in the Mass, but I can't make it myself. So you'll have a combination of all those things, and it's very easy to do. If you're a music director, you're able to, obviously you're working with your priest to put it in the bulletin, advertise this, maybe in the announcements after Mass or something, like where this is promoted, and you're not giving, like, you're giving an answer and you're thinking outside the box in how to address this problem without, again, putting it in people's faces. Because if you give a warning within the parish, like, oh, we've been doing Gregorian chant for like 3 months. Let's have one of our masses have Gregorian chant. And now you're integrating it into the Mass. And then you slowly integrate it into the other masses. And then all of a sudden you have Gregorian chant back in the Mass. And people in the parish have grown accustomed to that because they heard it 6 months ago, 7 months ago, as there's a group starting. And it's not going to be as stifling to them than just throwing it in the Mass. All right, so I will put this. Thank you. Yes, thank you. Patting myself on the back. So here's another one. Write an article or series for the bulletin about music in Mass. Right, like that's another one where you just start introducing the Mass in a way where it's peripherally present. It is not in their face, but then you slowly bring it into focus and make it a part of Mass. Because, like I said, Vatican II has stated it should have pride of place. Let's see. So the problem is the people leaving are generally the boomers who have more money than the young people who want tradition, and the parishes need that money. There's a lot of politics that go into this, unfortunately. So that is true. Until the young people who want the more tradition start getting a greater share of societal wealth, if that ever happens, our voice is muted in many areas of life, even the church. That is partially true. However, again, with that example of Susie Boomer on one side and families with children on the other, if you have your family and you talk to the priest with your family and you say, hey, we want to support the traditional aspects of the music in the Mass, or we want bells in the Mass, or expand it to other aspects, don't like give him a whole bunch of like options all at once. Don't say, I want this laundry list of things. That's not what I'm saying. Give him one thing that you support. And you say, like, I'd love to see this. I know Joey over there and his family would love to see this. And like combined, you make up like, I don't know, 8 to 10 people. Depending on the parish, that could be huge. So if it's a small parish, that's pretty big. If it's not a small parish, you're going to need some support probably. But it's a practical thing of dealing with it. This is unfortunately the politics of the church. And so it's not something where like you don't have money, but you're able to devote time. Your kids are able to devote time. And especially when it comes to depending on the diocese, I don't know if this is a thing that happens in all dioceses or not, but you have the check marks, right? Like, oh, well, so many kids are getting baptized this year. So many kids are having confirmation. So many kids are doing the Eucharist from your parish, and you want to make sure your parish doesn't get closed down. That's going to happen with the families that are having kids. Like, that's not going to happen with the boomers, except if a boomer converts in, right? Like, that's the only way that's going to happen. And that's highly unlikely compared, like, given the two scenarios, a young family who's just starting out having kids and a boomer converting into the faith. Yeah, you're going to get more people coming into the faith from the family having kids than you are with the, random boomer who's not Catholic coming in. Obviously, we hope both happen, right? Like it's not saying like they're not both great. But which one's more likely from a probability standpoint? From a practical aspect, the priest is going to have to, go with the fact that kids are going to be raised in those families, because that's probabilistically what's going to be the most likely thing to happen. Let's see. Sorry, I've neglected the chat for a second. I think right. So yeah, that's another. Yeah. Yes, Mark. Things like Latin and Gregorian chant can be added at devotions outside Mass. A local NL parish uses some Latin hymns as stations of the cross during Lent. Right. Like that's a perfect example of something where you're introducing it peripherally, and maybe, if there's especially if there's a lot of people who go to that, like if there's a lot of people who go to that, it doesn't take much to go to the priest and be like, hey, can we have Gregorian chant in the Mass? Excuse me. Like, it's not going to take a whole lot for the priest to be like, yeah, let's at least do it one Mass, whatever, or something, because he sees that there's there's support outside of Mass for it. And so it's all like, to a certain extent, so like I'm a scientist, I'm a statistician, it's building evidence. In some of these cases, it very much is about building evidence for what is available at the parish, like who actually wants it. And you need to show that evidence. And so with all these things happening on the side, that's a way of building evidence to point to the priest and be like, see, we have people who want to do that. Now, that's not going to convince the priest that is stuck in the 70s. Okay. Not without a miracle of conversion happening to that priest. And to that, I'm just going to be very frank, should probably go somewhere else. If you're stuck there, like that's what I would say. If he's going to be stalwart and promote that, go somewhere else. Because, and I know it sucks, but it's like the same thing. If a priest is not going to tap into the tradition that has led to him being a priest, that shows a fundamental problem with the understanding of what the faith has been, how the faith has been passed down, and what the deposit of faith is. Because again, this is something that is really important. Like, this isn't like, we're talking about Mass and what Vatican II, led by the Holy Spirit, said, and what we should be doing within the Mass. And if he's going to go against that, like that's kind of a problem. And this is where you kind of get like these soft refusals of religion, right? Like, where you'll show like Vatican II clearly saying something, you'll show the theologians' interpretations, you'll show the doctrinal understandings as presented from Vatican, and then they go, no, we're still not going to do it. Don't go to a parish with a priest like that. Like that like that's, there's no easy way to say that. It's like, if your priest abandoned you during COVID, like, don't go to his parish. Like, outside of, circumstances, if he just shut down because he didn't want to get sick, and he didn't want to like keep the sacraments going, and he tried literally nothing to keep it going. Just as I stated, when COVID was happening, you should look for a different priest, because this is about taking their priesthood seriously, and their relationship. Here's the important thing: their relationship to you, important, like, as being serious, because you are their spiritual son or daughter. They should be giving you the vegetables and the fruits and the meat of the faith. And if they're not, that's a serious problem. And so obviously there's no priests that come to mind that for this, but I know, like, based off these comments, they exist, right? So you have to pray about it, act in prudence, and be like, do I really want to fight with a priest who's never going to move? Or am I going to go to a different parish? Even like earlier, they said they went to a TLM. Because there's sometimes where it's going to be spiritually damaging for you to have that relationship where it's just nothing but conflict. And I'm bringing this up because it's directly relevant. I knew the guy. So the gentleman I met at a TLM after my first traditional Latin Mass in Kalamazoo, his name is Terry. He's a great guy. He told me about his son, and his son constantly asking, hey, why are you always fighting with the priest after the mass? Or why are you always telling me the opposite of the priest, what the priest says? Now, when he said fighting, he didn't mean fighting as in like, I'm sorry. It wasn't fighting the priest, but, just letting the priest know, like asking him questions. So it wasn't fighting in the like confrontational sense. It was just asking questions. But then on the car ride home, you would say, he'd tell the sons he'd tell his children, don't do this because what the priest said was wrong. And that eventually led to that kid becoming an atheist because he had an internal conflict between his spiritual father and his biological father going at odds with each other. And now you have this conflict that shouldn't be there. And he's again, like Terry's a great guy. And he told me that as a warning, like, to be vigilant about the faith of your children, but also to be careful. And I'm passing that story to you because that's how tradition works, right? Like if I know a way of passing on a devotion or an understanding to you, I'm going to do that. And because that's how tradition works. Like you keep what's good and you reject what's bad. And that'll change depending on the time. But again, we're talking about small T traditions, right? We're not talking about large T traditions like the sacraments. So, but that's a kind of a side statement. Again, Terry, like wonderful guy. He's just want to say thank you if you're watching, because he might be watching. It's from, Kalamazoo's not far, and I still talk to the people there. So, now back to this. So there's not many more to go over. Let's see. Be me at teen mass on Sunday. Oh my gosh, why is there a teen mass? All right, we're just gonna move that by that. No one cares what pride of place means. Susan from the parish council would rather the parish age out and close than let you change the music. I mean, it feels like that sometimes, right? Like it feels like that's what happens. Just in case I wasn't clear, I strongly support using sacred music. All right, yeah. But like it's just he's talking about the resistance, and there definitely seems to be this resistance to what tradition is. And again, the reason why I'm bringing this up is one, this can cause despair. But as someone who's had his parish change for the better in tradition in that way, I am here as a contrast to that. So I'm not bringing this up to bring you down. I'm bringing this up to be quite literally a counterexample to these things. And I've shown you a few cases where other people at their parishes have done the same thing. And so this is about promoting hope and trusting God to bring out the richness of the faith at your parish. And part of that is going to require you to actualize that. So there's a meme. My gosh, it's like you don't pray for a hole leaning against a shovel. Like you pray for a hole while digging that hole. And so you actually have to get your hands dirty. Obviously don't punch anybody. It's a bad joke, but whatever. So let's see. All right, I'm gonna read this just because it's funny. Bro, if I hear take and eat one more time at the communion hymn while I'm trying to have the most important moments of my life communing with Jesus, who has literally just come to live in me and reign over me sacramentally, this is unimaginably profound and intimate experience with the creator of the universe, where I'd love some silence or Gregorian chants, but instead I hear take and eat. Take. Literally every mass. I'm going to lose it, and my car broke, so I can't make it to Latin Mass anymore. God Save Catholic Liturgy Music. Hint, hint, how hard it is to use the countless beautiful songs composed for so many centuries of the church instead of something some boomer made in the 70s. Shake my head. So, okay. Now, I remember reading that and I wanted to share it because it's just, again, we're not in the 70s anymore. We're well past that point, and we want to go back to the timeless. Like the lady want to go back to the timeless aspects of the Mass. It's a long one. Let's see. I'm just going to scroll down. So, sorry, like part of this is just the nature of. Okay, so here's one controversial opinion. The ordinary Mass shouldn't be made to conform to the extraordinary Mass. The extraordinary Mass is beautiful in that it conveys the Roman Rites tradition, but that's not what the ordinary rite is meant to be. It is meant to be a sort of universal rite, in part why any priest of any sui iuris church can celebrate it. The point of it was meant to conform to the many cultures of the world, like the liturgical traditions of old did, and be able to bring the message of Christ to the new world. This is why I'm not entirely against the old 70s masses. Yes, they are corny and irreverent, but many Protestants during the 70s and 80s found it easier to jump ship to Catholicism. While it's certainly not perfect, and people have become far too attached to outdated traditions, the Novus Ordo fulfilled its purpose and still is to this day. So -5, but this person is like, oh my gosh, it's so hilarious. Big hermeneutics of rupture energy from this take. I'm like, I read this and it's just so funny. It's easier to jump ship to Catholicism. So yeah, there's no evidence to back up. Like we've gone over the Cara evidence, right? Like there has been an increase in Catholics, but that seems to primarily be from the what do you call it? The people just having kids. But then like on top of that, like the weekly Mass attendance does not help that at all, because like we're sitting at like 17 to 20%, when in the 70s and 80s it was like around 45 to 55, depending on the beginning or end of the 70s or 80s. And so we had a lot more practicing Catholics during the 70s and 80s, and so like that, again, that does not, the evidence doesn't back up that the Novus Ordo actually brought in a whole bunch of people. So, yeah. And so this is from the Cara data that we used for the priest crisis. Baptisms down from 800 to 500,000. First communions down by half since 2010. Children in parish sacrament prep down roughly half since 2010. Catholic marriages down slightly since 2010. Funerals slightly up since 2010. Okay, well, I mean, a lot of them are dying, and so like that's and yeah, I mentioned the priest crisis. So all right, let's see here. If you have any more questions about this or whatever, I do want to just emphasize that I'm here as a contrast to the people who are saying, oh, well, like this isn't going to happen. There's no inertia behind it. There is inertia behind it. I'm trying to help with that. Like I myself and others are trying to promote reverent Novus Ordos. Now, here's the crappy thing. The TLM only crowd is trying to push us down because they'll say things like, oh, well, you're just trying to be like the extraordinary form. No, we're not. We're trying to show the natural aspects of the Novus Ordo. That include beautiful music. And so we're not trying to look like the TLM. We're trying to bring out the richness of the Catholic faith within the Novus Ordo. So we have that aspect. And then on the other side, so we have the TLM only crowd. And then you have like the other side, the more liberal angle, where they're like, no, everything's just fine. Like you're just being uptight and rigid because you want like rules or some crap. And it's like, no, we're talking about the worship of God here. Okay. Like you cannot just pretend the rules don't matter. Like they're quite literally there for a reason. And so, Yeah, so like that's, I don't want to get too off the thing, but like that, both sides, people are we're getting like pincered from both sides, and it's really annoying because at the end of the day, most people have access to the Novus Ordo. Many young people, and I would argue most young people, want a traditional mass of the Novus Ordo. They like, in the sense that it's reverent and that it fleshes out what Vatican II actually called for, and not what the spirit of Vatican II bastardized. So we're trying to bring up what the church was supposed to do after Vatican II. And so that's my little rant. um, um, let's see what, because there's a bunch of people before. All right, so they also read while doing. So Matthew, I know, okay, because you've done a few comments there. There's actually, if you look at our video from that's the this was a response to the, oh my gosh, go up. So let's actually, here, it's this one. Let's see if it makes it bigger. The sacred music one here. There is actually an order to how the singing is supposed to happen. You can't just pick and choose where to sing. There are particular parts that you have to, as its entirety, have to sing, or you don't sing. And so we go over that there because there's a lot of parishes do a mixed thing, like do a thing they're not supposed to be doing, which is mixing the singing at inappropriate places when they feel like it. And that's not supposed to happen. And we go over that in that video. So if you haven't seen that, that's in that video. So all right, so let me look at yeah, Holy Innocents, pray for us. And so thank you, Olive, I appreciate it. And again, if you can look at supporting this family, that a family friend who lost their oldest son and his family, for funeral expenses, that would be greatly appreciated. It is out of state, and we know the person. Like, I personally know the person who is organizing this fundraiser. So if you can support them, that would be great and much appreciated. If you're not able to, prayers would also be good. So all of that would be helpful. All right, so I'm going to get off because it's been an hour and a half, and I appreciate everyone who's been watching. I appreciate everyone who's been engaged in chat. It's always fun to go back and forth in chat, and you bring up very different perspectives. And that's one of the reasons why I have chat on, is because I'm only one man. And I want different perspectives. I want to be challenged, and I want to address certain things that I don't think of. So I appreciate you guys in chat and responding. And yes, so thank you for watching this Monday, and I hope the rest of your week goes well. On Friday, I will probably move the live stream to 9 p.m. because it does seem that at 9 p.m. more people are just on, as opposed to when I start at 8:30. So I'll try that on Friday, and I haven't quite decided which lunch period I'm going to do the live stream. It might not be a live stream, but it might just be the political part of this video where I put up. So I haven't decided yet, as some things happened with my car, and I have to go get it from the shop. So again, thank you very much for taking the time to watch this, and enjoy the rest of your day.